This is Speak of the Devils on AZ Family Sports.
Welcome to Speak of the Devils, the premier television show for Sun Devil football. I'm Brad Denny with 3TV and CBS 5.
And I'm Joe Healy with DevilsDigest.com.
Joe, what a weird and wild start to the Kenny Dillingham era. There was the slogan has been Activate the Valley, but apparently Mother Nature took that to extreme levels as the Sun Devils open up their 2023 season in victorious fashion, but an extremely unusual night.
What a weird night it was after an eventful and odd and tumultuous off season. You figured, okay, let's lock into the season. Things are ready to go. Let's focus forward. And then, like you said, Mother Nature entered the chat. It was just one of the strangest things I've ever seen at a sporting event. The weather's operating normal enough, and then just kind of out of nowhere, you see this powerful gust of a haboob coming into Mountain America Stadium. The game gets delayed by about 2.5 hours, ends up tipping into Friday, and that's on this side of the country, let alone anybody that might have been watching like on the East Coast or anything like that. So a weird day. The most important thing, of course, Arizona State made it out with a 24-21 victory over Southern Utah, but still not a lot that we can truly draw from it. A win is a win, but still some things that that remain to be unseen that need to unfold over the course of the season, because these early season games against FCS opponents are typically where you can get a little bit of a litmus test of what your team's all about, although you may not open up the full playbook. Didn't really have that. Bit of an incomplete last week.
Yeah, the kind of the tale of two halves cliche was on full display, and for probably very different reasons than you ever used it in before. I mean, I was just personally up in the press box in the first half. I was doing live weather hits on our newscast a few times during that 2-hour, 36-minute rain delay. The game resumed a little bit after 11:30, wrapped up around 1 a.m. You mentioned the game started on a Thursday. Jaden Rashada's birthday, ASU's new starting quarterback, ended on a day that wasn't his. It was just a really weird night. But I thought in the first half, ASU got off to a pretty good start, had a 21-7 lead at the break. I thought the defense started off pretty well. It was getting after it. Clayton Smith did get an ejection for targeting, one of ASU's better pass rushers there. But offensively, they were looking like they were starting to get in a groove by the end of the half. Jaden Rashada had a touchdown pass with just 5 seconds left. They go into the locker room and they're thinking that, okay, carry that momentum into the second half. Mother Nature had other ideas.
As you talked about, it might sound very cliche to say it's a game of two halves, but this really is. I mean, this is one of the strangest scenarios, like I mentioned, in any sporting event that I've ever personally encountered. ASU had quite a bit of momentum at the end of that first half. You really think, if you think logically, with no rose-colored glasses about it, you really think that if this game plays on a normal timeline without interruption, that the final score is probably quite a bit different from when it ended up to be, because the Sun Devils had that bit of momentum entering the locker rooms. So, yeah, a birthday for Jaden Rashada. I'm sure he will not soon forget for a multitude of reasons, but as we kind of absorb it and think about what we saw there on the field, still some questions to be answered, of course. Didn't see quite a bit out there. Some vanilla play calling, which is to be expected from these sort of games. As the second half wore on, you saw teams that were just trying to wrap the game up, and both teams had a shot at a win. So for the Sun Devils, you had to kind of hunker down and play in that mode of, okay, we're not experimenting with things as you may against an FCS opponent, especially in the second half. You got to focus on getting that W and moving on, and that's exactly what Arizona State did.
Yeah, it was kind of a weird second half, very sloppy and undisciplined. I thought there was some sharp execution, not a whole, just that one targeting penalty in the first half, but then coming in the second half, and the dust and lightning had passed when they resumed. Still a lot of rain, so a lot of kind of sloppy conditions. Rashada missed a few passes that we'll dive into in the next segment, but 8 additional penalties for nearly 100 yards in that second half kind of derailed a lot of ASU's kind of momentum. Some uncharacteristic mistakes on special teams as well led to a blocked punt that Southern Utah was able to return for touchdown. Yeah, obviously a too comfortable or too close of a margin for a lot of fans to feel comfortable. But I think given the unique, weird circumstances of that night on Thursday, I think a lot of fans just might be easy, just chill out a little bit, take a deep breath. They got the win, as you mentioned, and that just the second half was just so weird and kind of so unprecedented in so many ways. Just like we still don't necessarily have a great read or on this team as of yet, but I think that'll change here coming up.
Yeah, I mean, there are things that you wanted to see better out of this team. talked about the penalties. That's something that just has to improve. That has been far too present within this program for far too long. Could be game one jitters, could be the circumstances of the weather, a lot of things that, okay, you can chalk it up to this or that as you move forward. That just needs to improve. I wanted to see more as far as punishment in the backfield from the Sun Devil defense to the opposing offense. Southern Utah ran 49 plays. I know that's been a topic across the college football world with these clock rules and things like that. Some folks saying that it really didn't have that big of an effect on week one. Southern Utah ran 49 plays. ASU didn't have any sacks. They had 3 tackles for loss. But on the other hand, you saw some guys step up. Cam Scadaboo, I thought, had a pretty nice debut. First game in a Sun Devil uniform. Xavier Guillory showed what he can do. That's someone that really stood out to me. That downfield ability as a pass catcher that y'all have been raving about all offseason, that came to fruition game one. As we mentioned, we'll break down Jaden Rashada's debut performance in greater depth here later on in the show. But I think all in all, you've got to be pleased with what you saw out of him.
Yeah, defensively, Jordan Clark, one of the senior team leaders here, had a really outstanding game. Tate Romney, for all you local fans, a Valley product. I thought he's played really well getting the start in place of Will Schaefer, who was serving a suspension. Romney was kind of flying around, and eventually Guillory was really good. I mean, he kind of has been a star in spring as well. So one of those deep weapons, and Elijah Badger was able to play in the second half a little bit. So Jalen Conyers, ASU's tight end, had a nice big play in that first half. Sat out the second half, was dinged up a little bit, but he'll be fine. That's good news for the Sun Devil offense right there. But all told, Joe, it was just a really weird night that had a lot of weird instances of just kind of Mother Nature, some weird play calling, some kind of week one things that you kind of expect a little bit. But ultimately, when you come out of a game 1-0, that's really all you can ask for. And we'll see how ASU is able to respond as things ramp up here in week 2 when they are hosting Oklahoma State. But after the break, Joe, we are going to be breaking down quarterback 1 for the Sun Devils, Jaden Rashada, the true freshman who made his college debut on his birthday. All right, folks, welcome back. Now, outside of the weather delay, let's talk about the biggest storyline from Thursday night's opener. That's the debut of ASU's new starting quarterback and true freshman, Jaden Rashada, obviously one of the most anticipated debuts. Had a good first half, and then kind of, as we talked about, hard to get a real true gauge in that second half just because of the long delay and the weather conditions.
One of the most eagerly anticipated recruits that ASU has had in quite some time. I know that fans were chomping at the bit to see what Jaden Rashada can do on the football field. We got just a glimpse of it because as that storm came in, as that second half finally kicked off, the game became just a weird thing. So we got a little taste of what number 5 can do. So what we're going to talk about here is we're going to break down some of the things that we thought he did exceptionally well, some areas of opportunity moving forward as well.
All right, let's start off with the positives. And I think right number 1, something that Kenny Dillingham talked about after the game, the poise. And that's even Jordan Clark, when he was after the press conference post game kind of wrapped up, he kind of said, stop, hold on. Let's take a moment and recognize what this kid did. And it was on his birthday as well. He turned 20, but he led a victory in his debut through some pretty adverse conditions. And just, he's one of those kind of even-keeled kids that doesn't get necessarily too rattled by the moment. A lot of weird things, a lot of obstacles thrown in his way, and he emerged with the W.
His poise was definitely tested in his debut game in ways that we probably have never seen and very likely won't ever see again. And you saw him succeed on many occasions. Even if some of the things may not be as flashy as you'd like to see, there were successes. He was able to operate the offense, not a quarterback who was staring down one read, and if that's not there, you take off running. Wanted to get players involved. And then when that storm hit, you had to come back after that 2.5-hour delay and play the game in front of a stadium that was probably about 98% empty. That's a lot for any quarterback, any player to take on, let alone a guy making his first collegiate start in his college debut. So if you look kind of at a grainier perspective of things and take it on smaller scales, there definitely were some victories there for Jaden Rashada for sure.
When Kenny Dillingham named Jaden Rashada the starter, one of the reasons was because he attacked downfield. He was able to stretch a defense and didn't have any fear of throwing the deep ball, and that was on display on Thursday night. Kind of that first drive, he had a 33-yard connection with Melquan Stovall, but the big play there on 4th and 8 from midfield, he had a 47-yard touchdown pass to Xavier Guillory. That in itself was a very impressive pass, but also I think it really kind of shows that your head coach in his debut is calling for to go for on 4th and 8 from midfield. That I think speaks volumes about what Kenny thinks about Jaden's potential.
And that's a cyclical thing when you've got that sort of trust going on. When your coach gives you the green light in that circumstance in your very first collegiate game, that's going to help with your self-confidence. That's going to help you know that you've arrived on this stage. You can play on this stage when you have that sort of trust in one another. Jaden Rashada completed 3 of his passes that added up to 123 of his passing yards. You do the math, that's 41 per on those 3 completions. And oh, by the way, those were completed to 3 separate players. So you saw him moving the ball around a little bit, not fixating on one particular receiver, getting guys involved. These are things in a game 1 that have to make you happy.
So outside of a win, which of course is priority number 1, things the coaches want out of their quarterbacks, no turnovers. And a young quarterback making his first career start, we mentioned a lot of obstacles and hurdles kind of thrown his way over the course of the night. Perfect in the turnover category, not a single one. Any head coach will take that anytime.
No turnovers. He surrendered 1 sack. Not necessarily going to put the blame on him for that particular one. As things got into crunch time in that weird second half, that could have been a scenario for a young player to make a mistake. It was a close game in a 3-point win for Arizona State. If he commits just 1 turnover the wrong way, that could have been a catastrophic loss for ASU. So for Rashada to be perfect in that capacity in terms of not turning the ball over, this was not a 42-point victory for the home team over an FCS foe. This is something where he needed to execute, and that he did in order to get that win.
Now, some areas of improvement. Now, of course, there will be a lot for a young quarterback like this. And both Kenny Dillingham and Jaden said that the rhythm was off in the second half. And you did see that there's a couple of touchdown opportunities that where he had open receivers deep downfield that he just missed. These are plays that he typically is make. We've seen him make in practice a number of times, but hopefully he's able to iron that out. And of course, the weather was a factor. In the second half, the rain was pretty consistent for the most part. So maybe a wet ball factor there, but just kind of dial in some of those passes because as the schedule gets harder, you can't miss those opportunities.
And you saw, the things that you mentioned, those happen. You saw some inconsistencies with some relatively easy throws, things to the flat, that sort of thing. So again, there are areas to refine, and that's what you want to focus on from week 1 to week 2, because those big plays, those are awesome, and you want to see those, but you also have to focus on the short game as well so that you can move the chains and not just be a boom or bust offense.
All right, so as the schedule ramps up, there's Oklahoma State's coming down, Fresno State. Then you get into the heart of Pac-12 play. This playbook's going to be opening up. They kept things pretty vanilla on Thursday night, so more is going to be thrown on this young man's plate. Be interesting to see how he responds.
And I would have to think that he's going to be fired up about that, to let his talent shine. And it's going to help that he will have his full personnel of offensive talent to work with. You think back to last week, Elijah Badger didn't play the first half. Jalen Conyers didn't play the second half. You want to get all these guys in the lineup at the same time, see those weapons at play for ASU. That is going to be music to the ears of Jaden Rashada. I think he's going to be very, very pleased to show what he has on a little bit higher scale than he did last week.
Speaking of higher scale, as I mentioned, the competition's ramping up. Bigger game atmosphere. It's going to be Saturday night, prime time in Tempe. It's going to be the blackout. How is he going to be able to respond? We know his physical talent is off the charts. Is he going to be able to maintain that level of poise in these bigger game atmospheres?
There are no gimmies from here. Yeah, Oklahoma State had a subpar year last year compared to what they've done in the past, and their opening win was not anything that it really blew anybody away. But Fresno State went on the road in Big Ten country and won. The Pac-12, as we know, undefeated to date. So again, no gimmies from here. So you need to improve each and every week. You didn't get as much out of that first week as far as a foundation as you would have otherwise liked. So that's why you have to accelerate and fast forward things into this game and hit the ground running.
All right, Joe, after the break, we're going to talk some fullback with DeCarlos Brooks, a Valley native, making his debut for the Sun Devils as we turn the page and look ahead to ASU's battle against Oklahoma State. Welcome back to Speak of the Devils. Now, Thursday wasn't just ASU's season opener. It was the start of the Activate the Valley era where a lot of former high school stars from here in the Valley were making their debuts in the maroon and gold.
It did not take Kenny Dillingham very long to get some Arizona blood on this roster. You think back to the tail end of last calendar year, he got the job, hit that transfer portal hard. And in game 1, we saw some guys from that transfer group, local guys, make a name for themselves. Tate Romney got the start. We also had some players on special teams. Tristan Monday also started on defense, along with one other guy who we're about to catch up with here in a moment.
Yeah, DeCarlos Brooks, the former Chandler High standout, played for Sean Aguano, ASU's current running backs coach, who played the last couple of years up at Cal. He made his debut for the Sun Devils, had a pretty solid game, had a couple of big runs, but most notably, you might have seen him line up at fullback. And that, of course, is something that's near and dear to my heart. And I was able to kind of move the chains in a couple of those situations. So after Tuesday's practice, I was able to catch up with DeCarlos because had to know how this fullback was added to this Sun Devil offense. So it's always good to catch up with DeCarlos, and he kind of dives into what he saw from week one, some of the impressions he had from quarterback Jaden Rashada, and also what to expect with this 3-3-5 defense of Oklahoma State. Loving to see the fullback position back in the Sun Devil offense. How did that exactly come about?
Honestly, like that was like something that we game plan like during the week and stuff like that. Originally it was supposed to be somebody different. It was supposed to be like a bigger body, but we also wanted to do like a running formation, be like, hey, let's do a fullback dive. But there's some people, I can't say names, that we couldn't put in because we didn't know how they handled with the rock. So there was like just put another running back in there, and then they just put me in. So that's how really that whole thing transpired.
What was it like just getting some fullback reps, picking up, moving the chains a little bit and taking those fullback dives?
Oh yeah, it was different. I've never been like a fullback, been like 3-point position. So usually I'm the one behind, but it's like, I mean, I do what I gotta do for the team. So I mean, and I was getting yards with it too. So I'm not even tripping like that.
Overall, a pretty productive night for you, and kind of a weird night overall in the game. But just when you look back at your performance, what are kind of the things that kind of jump out?
I feel like I did like a steady performance. I can always improve and get better like every week and every day. But I feel like I went in there, did my job as a second back. I just keep stacking days so maybe I get a better position. More carries, more catches, more targets down the field.
What was that? Just that 2.5 hour break like? How much of a disruption in kind of the rhythm? It seemed like at the end of the first half, the offense was kind of finally finding its footing a little bit, but then kind of that weird break in between.
You learn a lot about. I learned a lot about just our offense and just like our team, because that's like a huge distraction. We were in rhythm. I honestly feel like if we didn't have that delay, like we would have like steamrolled them, because we had so much momentum and so much energy going into it, stuff like that, and that kind of just flattened everything out. In the locker room, like some people were doing, like they said, some people were doing homework, some people were, just chilling and like they had in their head. Some people were like, oh, we even gotta play, like are they gonna cancel it or what? So just going through that adversity, that was really good for the team overall, and it showed me a lot.
How'd you spend that time?
I was really just like talking to people, like doing what I could just to be engaged and stuff like that. Eating as much as I can too. I was like popping Skittles just to stay awake too, because it was starting to get late. I was like, man, this is like about 3 hours, pushing 3 hours. So
yeah.
It's crazy, yeah.
Is the Skittles inspired by Marshawn Lynch?
I would say that he's inspired by Marshawn Lynch. I was thinking about Marshawn when I was in. I'm not gonna lie. So I mean, he's a GOAT with that. So I ain't gonna care.
What was your impressions of Jaden? His first career start at the college level.
I think he did good, especially he's an 18-year-old kid. Well, 19, it was his birthday, so I'm really excited for him and his future, stuff like that. He's got to be a great quarterback here at ASU, and I think his future is really bright for him.
Facing a pretty interesting Oklahoma State defense, what are some things that kind of jump out early in your film study?
I would just say the monster free safety that they have is a little bit different than most defenses. He'll come down and crash on run support, and we game plan for stuff like that, so we're going to have a bunch of plays called for that, and just the overall defensive whole.
What are some of the things that you want to kind of elevate? They always say like kind of the biggest improvements in a team go from week 1 to week 2. What are some of the things that you think this team can, especially the offense, can make a big jump in week 2?
I would definitely say the explosive plays, especially in the run game. I definitely feel like next game we're going to have a lot more explosive plays, like 20, 25, 30 plus runs, yard runs, stuff like that. I think that's the biggest thing we can improve in. I can improve on is like breaking those runs, so like we're not in unfortunate circumstances when it comes to field position.
Any chance we might see some more fullback action from you?
You might see that too. You might see a whole bunch of things, so you never know this week. So yeah.
Welcome back to Speak of the Devils. It's now time to look ahead to ASU's matchup on Saturday against Oklahoma State.
The Sun Devils welcome the Cowboys to Mountain America Stadium. Of course, the back end of a home and home, but this is not the last time these two teams will be seeing one another, because next year and beyond, these are Big 12 conference foes. But if we're focusing just on this weekend, this is year 19 under Mike Gundy. Wild. He is the second longest tenured college football head coach at the FBS level. Remember, he said, I'm a man, I'm 40. He's 56 now. So that was a little bit ago. This is a team very interesting as far as where they are right now. They went from 12 wins in 2021 to just 7 last year. Of course, one of those was against Arizona State in Stillwater. A lot of transfers. You thought that ASU lost a lot, and they did. Oklahoma State has lost a lot of personnel as well. They were picked 7th in the Big 12 conference. Again, this is a team that played in the Fiesta Bowl just 2 years ago. They started the season in unspectacular fashion as well, a 27-13 win over FCS level opponent Central Arkansas last week.
All right, so let's dive into our 3 keys to a Sun Devil victory. ASU is a 3.5-point underdog heading into this matchup. Number 1, and that Kenny and Jaden Rashada talked about it, find a rhythm for the young quarterback. Not just get into a rhythm, but stay in a rhythm for the duration of the match.
Yeah, last week, a good thing is Jaden Rashada had 123 yards on just 3 completions. The bad thing is that he had 123 of his yards on 3 completions. So he had 113 passing yards on his 15 other completions. You want to see a little bit more variety and more effectiveness other than that deep ball game. You don't want to take that away, just add to it.
All right, so flipping over to the defensive side. Now, ASU runs in a very aggressive defensive scheme under new defense coordinator, Brian Ward. They kept things pretty vanilla and lost one of their top pass rushers early on in Clayton Smith, but they just did not make a whole lot of difference-making defensive plays. Just 3 tackles for loss, all which came in the first 2 drives of the night. No turnovers, no sacks from an improved pass rush. So when you're playing an offense that might have had an underwhelming opener, but still a lot of talent on the Cowboy offense, and especially Mike Gundy offense, you're going to need to make some big splash, difference-making type plays on defense.
Last week, Southern Utah only got 49 offensive plays off, but ASU was unable to muster a sack, only 3 TFLs. Last week, Oklahoma State attempted 48 passes and ran the ball 38 times, so some potential more opportunities there for ASU to strike. We saw what Oklahoma State did on defense against ASU last year and how that completely put the game into the Cowboys' favor. ASU needs to generate some pressure like that.
ASU simply can't hurt themselves. And so the number 3 key is just kind of clean up your act. They had a lot of penalties in the second half, and that hurt. They had a special teams miscue, which cost them a touchdown on the block punt. And you can't out-talent teams the rest of the way on your schedule if you're Arizona State. They're in the midst of a rebuild, so they just have to make sure they play some mistake-free ball against the Cowboys.
Part of that, to me, is to keep the pass rush at bay. Very likely the biggest question mark, the biggest area of concern coming out of week 1 for ASU was the offensive line. Sadly, that was a concern that we had all off season long. So we've yet to see anything on the field that takes away from that concern. Oklahoma State had 5 sacks a week ago against Central Arkansas. They've got guys like Colin Oliver, who previously was a double-digit sack performer at Oklahoma State. Nathan Latu had a sack and a half last week. So I know the personnel is a lot different between this Oklahoma State team and the one from a year ago. But the Cowboys had 3 sacks. Seems like it was a lot more than just 3 last year. It seemed like they were in the backfield on dang near every play, especially in that second half. They did have 8 total tackles for loss. Like I said, that quarterback pressure, that backfield pressure was what really took the game out of hand last year because the Sun Devils were competitive for a good stretch of it. But I know the slate is wiped for pretty much both teams, not just with the coaching change for Arizona State, but a lot of personnel differences. If ASU is going to succeed in this game, they need not only to pressure the quarterback, but keep Jaden Rashada upright, keep the running backs away from TFLs, give them some lanes to work with.
All right, so real quick, some of our game predictions. I think ASU is going to hold firm. They're going to hold court on their home field. 27-24, the Sun Devils get a big win on the blackout night.
I still need to see a little bit more concern by last week as far as just not being able to get more on the table and more consistency and fluidity in the game, largely because of that weather delay. Hopefully, if I were in a press conference, Kenny Dillingham wouldn't call me out for not believing, but I'm going to be a little conservative here, and I'm going to pick a 31-21 Oklahoma State victory. If I'm wrong, I accept being wrong in that regard.
The blackout game is going to kick off at 7:30 at Mountain America Stadium. If you're in town, make it out there and fill the stands, and make sure to catch our full episode of Speak of the Devils. We take a deeper dive into this entire matchup, available everywhere you get your podcasts.